Hi, Lucy. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining me. Can I please ask you for your full name and your title?
My name is Lucy Mitchell, and I'm the Managing Director of the Seewoo Group.
And Lucy, can you tell me, please, who is the leader who's inspired you the most?
Hmm. That's a difficult question because there's lots of them. I think in my professional life, the person who has inspired me the most would be my father. So he came over here at age 16 and built the Seawoo Group as it is today, a 40-year-old business. And he built it to a 70 million turnover business from literally working as a kitchen porter in a restaurant when he came over here because his father had passed away when he was very young. So he was sort of sent out by his mum to come and support the family and send money home. So I think that I think what he built is really inspirational, but I think also his sort of grit and determination. He's a real workhorse. He always has been. So I think, that's all quite easy to admire and be inspired by. But what's really, I suppose, crystallized that for me in the last 3 years leading the business now. I took over the business from him in 2017 and we built a new modernized business. I think that for me, his, I'm trying to think how to put this, the way that he very easily and freely handed over the reins and sort of in such a supportive way. I think in family businesses, often it's quite tricky for the person who has spent their whole life ploughing everything into the building of that business to actually um, listen to the person that they're handing over to, but also to sort of step back enough to give room to make the changes and also to sort of, I suppose, embrace that vision and the vision of the future of the business. So I think the way he's handled that has been really inspirational. But then also as an aside, from a personal level, I think that the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, is incredibly inspirational as a person. I think she always manages to have the sort of the appropriate tone of dignity and progress and where necessary, reconciliation and reflection. I think that, the way she has conducted herself during her reign is really quite inspirational.
Absolutely right. And what would you say is the greatest learning that you've had in your career so far?
I think that, well, there's several things for me. I think, I've had a very varied career and I've had a lot of, a lot of successes and a lot of failures too. So I think that for me, failure should always be a positive. So, as long as you take learnings from it, you should never be afraid to fail. You should, always learn from your mistakes, but, embrace it. I also think that embracing your emotions and using those to sort of empower yourself and those around you is really important. And I think it makes you a more empathetic leader because people need to be able to relate to you and people can relate to honesty. They can relate to, it makes you more accessible and open, I think, as a leader. So I think I've really learned that as I've been leading the business, that probably my biggest tool is being somebody that's approachable, accessible, human, really, and not afraid to show emotion in the appropriate context, obviously. But I think that's empowering, and I think that it's really important, actually. And also the last thing I want to add there is that I think, and this is something I've taken through my I'm just trying to think how long my career's been. I'm trying to think how old I am. Through my 33-year-old career or whatever it is not to underestimate the power of relationships. Still, I think that they are the fundamental of every business relationship. People buy from people. They don't buy from qualifications. So I think that's critical. And I think in today's world, I see my teenage children struggling with this. It's hard to apportion the correct amount of importance to your qualifications without neglecting the very human side of communication skills, being able to build relationships. It's such a skill that you can't learn. People are either good at relationships or they're not, and it fundamentally they underpin all business relationships. I think so.
Absolutely true. And if we're talking successes and failures, what would you say is your greatest success so far?
So, funnily enough, my greatest failure and my greatest success are completely interlinked. So, I think that if you say to me, can I turn it on its head and answer my greatest failure first, and then explain how that's become my success? So, my greatest failure, I always felt, was the fact that I went to Bristol University and I left in the first term. So, I didn't see it out. There were a number of different factors which conspired, I think, to make that my destiny. One of which was that I wasn't in halls, so it was quite a difficult start. And probably the most important thing was I'd taken a year out. I'd travelled out to Australia and New Zealand, and I'd worked out there. I'd worked with a real entrepreneur who was quite inspiring, actually, he was. And I worked for him I planned to travel everywhere, but I ended up getting myself into a job and then working for the best part of the whole of my year off, both in New Zealand and then over in Sydney. And I think that then I went to university, and it almost felt like a backward step. I'd sort of, I'd experienced being completely independent, age 18, living and paying rent, earning my own money, having to sort of be really resourceful to survive and, really make sure that, I was, working so I could pay my rent, pay my bills. And I think that sort of then stepping back into a university environment was a really difficult thing to do. And also not being in halls made it difficult. So I think I've always felt throughout my professional career a little bit sort of, I suppose a little bit inadequate, or maybe like it was a failure, or maybe, how would have things panned out? Should I have stayed and completed my degree? Both my children, my daughter's actually now at Bristol, and my son is also, about to embark on university. And I look at them and I sort of partly think, oh gosh, I'm a little bit jealous of this excitement and fun they're having. And, then on the flip side of that is I think that is, quite a lot of it is a complete DOS, and what are they actually doing? What are they actually learning? I've got my education through sort of, hard knocks and failures and successes and, working. That's how I built my education over the years. So I think that I've always felt a little bit, as I say, maybe like that was a failure, but actually on the flip side of that, I think it's my greatest success, because I fell into, after a year or two of doing all sorts of different jobs and starting my own little travel company and doing all these things, I then fell into a career in software, very fortunately, just at the right time, at sort of dot-com boom. I fell into a marketing role, which I then sort of grew over a decade to work for many American software companies that turned from startups into billion-dollar companies, managing regions, EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, as a marketing manager, and really living such a fast-paced life in such a fast-changing industry. There was no time for, you just really had to go with it. You had to, learn on your feet. I always found myself, taking the next step, sort of always feeling quite like I was not ready for it, feeling a little bit intimidated by it, thinking, oh my God, can I do this? Can I do this? But then, getting myself out of my comfort zone into that next opportunity, and then, really making it mine. And I think if I'd gone to university, would I have followed that path? Would have I had that sort of real drive and determination to, this, okay, I haven't gone down that route. And at that time when I chose not to go down that route, it really was when everyone was, going to university. So, seeing the rise of apprenticeships now is amazing. And I think fantastic, because I don't think it's for everybody. And I think there need to be, really viable careers, and professions that don't result from a university education. And that should be celebrated. And I think that, to see that now is really heartening for the next generation. Whereas when I was at university, it was very much, you go to university, everyone goes to university, everyone goes and gets their degree, So I suppose, yeah, my greatest failure, as I perceive it to be, has also been my greatest success.
Incredible, and so true. And it's good, I think, really good and positive, as from a message perspective for a lot of young people. Um, as I had it exactly the same way. So I totally understand. And could I ask you to tell me a story about maybe an incident or an event that changed you as a professional or influenced you as a leader at all?
Yes, you can. I've got a very large event. So, so having had spent a decade in software, as I said, my father was pestering me to move into the family business. Um, Completely different, obviously food, Asian food, Chinese food, Thai food, Malaysian food, very different to software, going from a very corporate environment, very fast-paced corporate environment to a very complex family business. So I was quite hesitant and I sort of pushed back for a number of years. Anyway, it coincided with wanting to have a family, looking for a career change. The amount of travel that I was doing in my software career was just really not compatible with young children and where we were at that time in our lives, my husband and I. So I agreed and I joined the family business. And then I spent probably 15 years being utterly frustrated at seeing what was a brilliant business, a 70 million pound turnover business, something my father had built from scratch, and not only had he built this amazing food empire from scratch, he also has been very influential in bringing Chinese food to the UK, along with a lot of other people. He's one of those early adopters he's the first person to import pak choi, for example. He really has been hugely influential in that area. So coming into his family business, finding a lot of struggles with the way the business was run. It wasn't just my father involved. As I said, it was a family business. So I think that coming into that environment and then being able to take my vision for the business forward was a real challenge. And in the end, we ended up demerging the family business back in 2017. So my father and his brother were disagreeing on their vision for the future of the business. So, and I definitely had a vision with my father. We both were completely in sync here on, the fact that the market was changing, the sort of increase of sort of adoption of Southeast Asian cuisine, into the mainstream, becoming very trendy, very popular, and that just growing meant that our customer profile was changing. And as a sort of a very traditional business, we weren't actually modern enough to service those customers. We didn't have the right staff, we didn't have the right infrastructure in place, the right procedures. So we decided to demerge the business back in 2017 and take parts of the old business, including a manufacturing site, which I'd always pushed to have a BRC accreditation, because I could really see how the sort of Southeast Asian food sector was going and growing. And I knew that we had to deliver, my vision was to deliver this authentic product, but in a very modern and professional way, so that we made ourselves accessible to all types of customer, and that became my father's vision too. So that was a huge challenge, and I think I had possibly completely underestimated how difficult it is to pull apart a 40-year-old business with all its quirks, and then to restore it and to set it on the right path. And we were just getting onto that right path, and then of course COVID hit, so there comes large challenge number two. So I think there have been a number of challenges, but I would say those have been my most challenging situations, which have really influenced my style of leadership and my understanding actually of the business, and getting really under the skin of it to be able to take it forward.
And if you could, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self now?
Gosh, a lot. I think I would say several things, I think, really, that for me stand out. And I say this to my children all the time. I say to them, probably the most important thing, which I've touched on earlier, is don't be paralyzed by your mistakes. Don't take them as a weakness. See them as a strength. There's something to be learned from every mistake you make. And let me tell you, those people who say they never make mistakes are making the biggest mistake of their life, because everyone makes mistakes. So I think I would say that, and I've always said that to my kids growing up, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, take the learnings from it and move on. it's important. So I think that's one thing. And I think grasping every opportunity is another. Like I said to you, I think that it's very easy to stay in your comfort zone. It's very easy to think to yourself, and I say this probably harks a little bit back to what I thought was my greatest failure for many years, and my slight insecurity about not completing my university education. That, don't allow yourself to be held back by that. And I didn't. I was lucky in that I did put myself out of my comfort zone, and I did grasp opportunities that I knew very well when I was going for them. Probably, a couple of steps up the ladder from where I was. And I went in with huge fear and trepidation of, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? This is just terrifying. I've sort of almost blagged my way through this interview and got myself this role. And now I've actually got to go in there and deliver on it. And I think that, so I think that that's really key. I think putting yourself out of your comfort zone is how you grow, and if you don't try, you don't know. So if you just have that inkling of thinking, I think I can do this. Do it, try it, because what have you got to lose? So I think that's one other thing. And then the last thing, I think, which is just, I think that goes across all areas of life, not just in your professional life, but also in your domestic life, with friendships. I think what is so key is to be adaptable. I think being adaptable and being empathetic and not afraid of your emotions, and it is a really, really important thing. Don't be stifled.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much. That's actually
I don't know about that, but anyway, thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you for your time.